Okay, so I'm happy to call to order the Curriculum Instruction and Assessment Committee. And we have a couple of action items here and a few review items. Our first action item is the second reading on 704 KAR 370. These are revisions to the Kentucky Framework for Personnel Evaluation, and Associate Commissioner Ellis and her staff are here to talk to us about that.
So good afternoon or evening or wherever we are. So this is the second read to the Kentucky Framework for Personnel Evaluation, formerly known as PGS. So there were changes in Senate Bill 1 that, as you all know from last time, really provided much more flexibility to the districts. And so our steering committees, the principal and the teacher steering committees, did get together as before the first read and made recommendations. And so this is a second read. What we have done, we made very few changes, to be honest with you. We reviewed this with LSAC. And they were very supportive. The only thing that they did ask is for clarification on significant change for the department to review the certified evaluation plan. That is written in, so we will do a better job of clarifying that language. OEA did submit some suggestions, and they were mostly grammatical, just little catches, but nothing substantial changes or no content-specific changes. But just to let you know what we have in there, just as a reminder, is basically what we've done is we have added into the regulation what we have, and this was in the in the documents that were attached. But basically, we have this original graphic to show the steps of the professional growth and effectiveness system when it was a statewide system. What we have done is really taken all the required pieces out, and we've put in there where districts would need to make decisions. So the things that we were able to preserve so far, and hopefully it will continue, are the actual Danielson frameworks and James Strong standards for the principals. That really gives so much more clarity than just the 10 Kentucky standards that we had previously.
Could you say that one more time?
Yes,
I wanted to make sure I heard the Danielson piece.
Yes, so we still kept the Kentucky Framework for Teachers, which is the Danielson Framework for teachers and for other professionals. The James Strong standards for principals we kept as well. Everybody was very favorable about that. They liked the detail. They liked the continuum of improvement. And so we kept that. So what we did is we took, like we said before, the domains, and we broke those into the 4 measures. So it really alleviates any worry of someone saying, well, if you just write a professional growth plan, that's how we'll evaluate you. But there are really multiple measures, as what Senate Bill 1 called for. And so we broke those into planning, environment, instruction, and professionalism. And it's aligned to the framework, so it really goes back to a document that gives much more guidance and expectations and descriptions of what should be going on and actions that should be observed. And so we have that, and we also are guiding basically the districts just that they're going to have to decide how they'll make the decisions for decision rules, and what evidences they'll use to determine those ratings. We did keep the ratings names the same. There's a lot of support for consistency. They like the consistency of having ineffective, developing, accomplished, and exemplary. That aligns with the framework that we use and we've used for nearly 5 years. And so we kept that consistent, and that was very much appreciated, and we got a lot of good feedback based on that. But it's really going to be a lot of decision making on the 50-50 committees for the districts, and we'll be having to provide support for that. So the 50-50 committee, just as a reminder, is 50% teachers, 50% administrators. They have to have that balance. It could be 2 people or 200. It's up to the district on how they determine that balance. And so we basically have gone through the reg and we've stripped out the mandatory detailed pieces, but we have kept, like I said, the measures, the frameworks that we have in reference, the rating name, and then the process itself. So that's what we were asked to do in SB1, is to really create the framework so then the districts can develop their system of evaluation. So a lot of interchangeable use of words, but that's what we were asked to do. So that's what we've done here. And like I said, the only thing we added were the documents in reference, and we'll make that one wording change for clarity on when the certified evaluation plans would be submitted. And just for clarification, they would be submitted not as a you have a good plan or not a good plan, but it's really alignment to the regulations and the statute to ensure that they are following the law and that are defensible and fair. And if we felt like there was a red flag, that would be feedback we would provide just to ensure that they are try to make it as aligned to the law and with the intention as possible. So that is where we are. Do you have any questions?
It's fair to say that we'll no longer be able to track, nor will we be able to ask the percentages of teachers in each of the different ratings categories.
You are exactly right. It was listed specifically in SB1 that we were prohibited from collecting that data. And so it's unfortunate, but it is what was written, and so of course we honor that. We never overstepped our bounds before by ever digging into individuals. We always had an aggregate that was provided to us by the vendor. We never had that access, but yes, you are correct. So that will be difficult.
So what is the data that cannot be collected? I'm sorry.
It would be the percentages of teachers who were rated as ineffective, developing, effective, or highly effective.
We can't collect that data, so we were prohibited from that.
And there's nothing to stop an independent researcher from requesting that data, and if they have the permission of a district to cooperate, then they can
You are
still do
correct.
that.
And the one thing that did come up, just so you all are aware in full transparency, is in the ESSA plan for Title I schools, the recording of ineffective teachers. And so what we proposed through working with Title I and even talking with some legislators, just so they understood what we were asking, is that we would put a data collector on Infinite Campus, and the schools would just mark if the teacher was ineffective. And so that data would not be something we would report out, would be for Title I purposes only for ESSA, because they do require that is a component that's collected for Title I schools. So we did talk with legislators and just share what we had to do. When we put that in our ESSA plan, we'll see if it's approved. I don't know if that would be sufficient.
From a research perspective, Gary, I would be cautious even of collecting that data and drawing inferences, because there's still enough variation in the regulation that those labels could mean different things.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely, especially now.
Yeah.
Especially now, because not everybody's using the same evidences.
Right.
And if they choose to use weights versus a matrix, it's very different. And it does give a lot more flexibility on that. You're absolutely right. So we've struggled a little bit with that since it says no in the law, and then ESSA, it's in for specific Title I schools, which is a large number, in our state. So that's something we may need additional guidance on, depending on what the federal government says.
It's really unfortunate after the
I know.
great success and
Yeah.
acceptance that
It
is
is.
given that throughout the state.
It is, but we haven't stopped the support or promotion of best practice. One of the things we kept in, which LSEC did ask about, is that we did keep the language around expectations like peer observers. Not that it was mandatory, that if you use peer observers, what the purpose and the use of that. And so that was well received. We have already updated our online training, so it's free for peer observers. We're working through a vendor right now to replace EDS because they're sunsetting. And the reason that we're pursuing that is it will provide free training for districts, so it won't be out-of-pocket cost for them, which it has been in the past, because there's still required training for your observers, which is good, needs to be. And we get our numbers monthly of just usage, not anything else, and we're in the thousands already. And people don't have to use the platform at all, so that's voluntary. So to me, that's a service that really promotes the collection of data and multiple evidences, and not just a one-shot deal. So
And using the Donaldson framework is extremely useful.
very popular. It's very popular. Yes.
Anything else for Dr. Ellis on this one? So we'll need a motion and second from committee members to approve 704 KAR 370.
So many.
Moved by Nuwana, second by Lisa. All in favor? Aye. Okay.
Thank you.
And next, we have a request for an alternative model of school-based decision-making. This is a request from Atherton High School in Jefferson County, and Dr. Foster is going to present this item.
So typically these requests to make an alternate model of SBDM come to you in June, but this school didn't get theirs in time for the June board meeting, so that's why it's coming to you in August. You all have seen these before, but basically the Atherton High School, they would like to have 2 student non-voting members on their SBDM, and that is considered using an alternative model, so we have to bring that to you guys for your approval.
Okay. Questions for Kelly?
Just a comment, as I mentioned on the phone when we had our smaller discussion, I think that's a great idea. So I'd like to see more of the schools have more student input into the decision-making process.
Any idea how many other schools might?
I knew you were going to ask me that. Let's see, we brought one last year, didn't we?
I anticipate that might be an increase because the Bridger Committee's student voice team has advocated for that specifically. So
I think it's less than 10.
Yeah, but I anticipate next year we'll probably get quite a few.
Any other questions or comments on this request?
Really like it.
Okay, then we need a motion and second to approve this request for an alternative model of SBDM decision-making for Atherton High School. Lisa moves.
Second.
Nuwana seconds. Thank you. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. All right, thank you. Kelly, you can stay put there.
Okay.
Our next review item, this is a first reading, so we don't have to take action on this, but this is changes to 704 KAR 7090 Homeless Children Education Program.
So in a nutshell with this one, we are aligning our homeless regulation to the changes regarding homeless and ESSA. And the biggest, probably, I don't think it would be a red flag, but things that we've heard from the field, it requires a little bit additional training by the homeless staff at a district level. But that's kind of the biggest change. We're just aligning this to match up with ESSA.
And this is going to improve services for our homeless children. Is
Yes.
that right? That's the whole purpose of this. And since we seem to be in the top 2 in the nation now per capita for homeless children, I hope we'll really focus on the improvements this act will bring to districts for homeless children.
Any other questions on this one?
How many homeless children are there?
And you got that number?
I do. It's not. I have it.
6,000 in Jefferson County.
It's about 26,000,
26?
and that's by one member.
26,000.
1,000.
Serious?
That's by one measure. There's 2 different calculations by which the state makes that determination.
Is that the McKinney-Vento measure?
That, I believe that one is the state
Formula.
calculation versus the district calculation, which is the other.
So the 26, though, that's the McKinney-Vento?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
If there's no other discussion, thank you, Kelly. We'll look forward to a second reading in December.
Thanks.
Our next review item will bring Amanda Ellis back to the table. This is first reading on 704 KAR 3540, changes to uniform academic course codes.
So this is a first read. It's pretty simple, but the reason that we're bringing this forward is, as Dr. Pruitt has mentioned, we're working on unifying the course code list and really deprecating a lot of codes that we weren't for sure what they meant, or they've been added since 2010. Lots of changes, and so what we're doing is really narrowing down with groups of people. We have advisory groups with counselors to get feedback, to prepare for the opportunity and access and the accountability system, and start to really narrow our system and clean it up. And so, as he had mentioned earlier, we may have had algebra advanced, honors algebra, algebra intermediate, so what is the difference? And so what we've done is we've taken with our teams, we've taken the course codes and aligned them to standards. So if a code is saying it's algebra, then there's algebra standards that align to it. So if someone has said this child has taken this class and have passed, what they are saying is this child has passed this course with these standards. And so it has been a monumental task, but worthy. And we're about 85% finished, maybe a little further down the road now. So what we're doing now with the regulation is we're not really changing the regulation so much, but what we have done in the past is we had a document in reference that was filed with the bill, or excuse me, with the regulation. So if we change it every year, we would have to open the regulation every year. Well, course codes change every year. CTE adds courses, some get deprecated, some get combined. If there's new requirements that come out, for example, we already have dual credit Bible classes, but the Bible literacy requires 3 courses. So that would be 3 additional course codes we would have to add, especially once the standards are written and established. So what we're asking for in this regulation basically is that we would update this every year. So we would bring this forward to Dr. Pruitt to review, and of course we work hand in hand with EPSB on this with certification, teacher certification. That's how they align that work. And so we've just changed it. Instead of having a document and reference where we'd have to open a regulation to change it, it's a living document. And so we're really trying to get in line and make this a document that is concise and very easy to use in timely manner for our high schools, and even all the way down to elementary and middle this year, or coming up, because we'll be collecting data from K through 12 that we haven't even collected before on some levels in elementary. So it's a huge undertaking, but I think it will be a big step in the right direction of really seeing what children have access to, what they're taking advantage of, who's enrolled in these courses. You know, you talked about advanced courses, who's taking them. Really helps us to break that data down to see. And so that this is just one step to getting the regulation aligned with what we're trying to do. So, any questions you have for that?
I have a couple.
Sure.
One is, I think getting standardization is good, and we talked about that earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But to build on that, I was wondering, how do we verify, or what is the process to verify that the schools are using the course codes, and that when you say you're taking, let's say, honors algebra 1, you know, that they have met that core curriculum that is set out in that?
Sure, it's a good question. So that's in the process of exactly what we're going to be doing. One of the things that Stephen has mentioned is his ideas about new requirements, graduation requirements, and assessment, and how it's addressed in high school specifically. And so I don't know exactly what he wants to share about that, but I know that he is much more interested in like more of an end-of-course that would measure that. So even if a child took an Algebra 1 course in 8th grade, it's still Algebra 1. It's not 8th grade Algebra 1, it's Algebra 1, and so that EOC would be given. Now that is visionary thinking on that. You know, clearly we're in some pretty tough times to be creative with what we're going to do, but that's the intention, is to align. The piece with the elementary and middle is a lot about time. So they may say, well, you're signed up for the arts, but does that mean you get it once a month? You know, do you get it once a week? Do you get it? And so they are looking into how to monitor days or hours. You know, how much time are students really being exposed to, even science and social studies, because, you know, there's some bad habits that have been instilled for a while about a lack of social studies and science education until the years of assessment. It's unfortunate, but it's true. And so those are the things that we're talking about, but what we're trying to do is align those codes first to make sure we even have an accurate code and we have it aligned to something instead of it just being a random course. Because when it's particularly difficult in science because the requirements for science in high school specifically, you have to have 3 science credits. So you can probably imagine how large that database is of course codes, whereas English is much smaller because you do have English electives, but your required pieces are pretty cut and dry. Mathematics is a little bit larger with that 4th year math, but it's pretty concise. The science and social studies are pretty large. They're vast. I'm sure, Gary, you can imagine with social studies how many courses could be offered, but that's what we're trying to do, is really narrow down. So we've looked at the number of kids who are enrolled. Why are they enrolled in that? We looked at our special education course codes. We've looked at our advanced coursework. We're thinking about dual credit. How do you code that? Because it's a university code, and everybody does it a little different, so that's a challenge. But that's what we're working towards. And so, you know, all about that is going to be quality of data and the use of it. So there's a lot of support. We are planning to release the course codes in January and have that ready. But then our real plan is how do we provide that support and prepare, because a lot of our Infinite Campus people who enter the data into Infinite Campus may be your secretaries, they may be your counselor, they may be the teacher, they may be central office. And so there's different capacities and amounts of time. And it doesn't matter till it matters. So now it matters. And so we're going to have to really put in a lot of support, and that's what we're building out. And the feedback we got from counselors is counselors need support this way, but principals need support this way, and central office or IC data collectors need this. And so we're really trying to break out our support to be intentional. And then as far as the follow-up on the quality, one of the things Stephen has discussed is how we possibly claim schools to really do a thorough check and see, because there are going to be mistakes. There's going to be a lot of mistakes. And so we have to be okay with that and help guide and really push on, you said here that every single kid in the school all has science for 2 hours a day. But how are you getting that? Because now it says you have an 8-hour day and you're only here for 7, and that includes lunch and bathroom breaks and, 15 minutes of recess. And so it's just really pushing on the quality of the entry of the data. It's going to be a lift, but that's what we're working towards, to really get that concise, to even have a system for districts to use. Because if it's not a concise system for them to use, it's going to be nearly impossible to ensure quality. So that's the process where we are.
And then to build on that, because this situation happened in one of the school systems where my children have attended. And I appreciate it, because one of the things is they had 2 honors math classes in 8th grade.
Mm-hmm.
By Christmas, they revamped the 2 classes. Those kids who were excelling, they moved them into a group, and then they kept the other group that, while they were all still taking the same thing, they really pushed this one group. And I thought that was a great idea. So, because if those kids can move at a faster rate, why hold them back?
Sure.
So my question is, will this prevent schools from being able to push kids that can excel in certain areas?
I don't think so. I think it'll probably encourage it, because it will not be the definition of, well, we can't really offer that course. That's why you see a lot of times, even with middle school, you see, well, this is 8th grade algebra, when really that child may be advanced and they need it, they're taking high school algebra, so it's really to identify the true standards. Now, as far as slowing down or speeding up for what this child needs, that's up to the teacher, and absolutely that code should not prohibit that by any means. It's just to really have a better idea of what students even have access to, and what's being offered. But it won't solve all the problems, and we know that, but it is a system to clean up.
Oh yeah, and I totally agree with that,
Yeah.
because I was trying to, as I mentioned before, but for everybody's purposes, my nephew is 2 years behind my son, who's a senior, and trying to assist my sister-in-law with that. And the course descriptions were totally different than what mine were. And so we didn't even know, and this was we're talking math and science. So
Right.
I'm sitting thinking, well, that's not what ours was called,
Mm-hmm.
So I think having consistency is good, because between school districts, it's important.
Both superintendent groups and counselor, both of our groups, the LSAC and the advisory council that were counselors, were unified in that. They said, we have such a hard time knowing how to transfer the credits and be fair. Because we don't know what it is that they've done, and we don't want the holes. And so both said that, especially the kids who transfer, and those who have a very transient population were thrilled. Northern Kentucky, they're pretty tight up there, but there's several districts in one area, and so they were really encouraged by that. But yes, I agree.
That's great.
Wayne, you had a question?
Yeah, Amanda, you mentioned you guys working together with EPSB.
Mhm.
Do you foresee potential changes with teacher certification or alignment, differences in alignment with teacher certification and ability to teach courses because of this work?
Possibly. I know that Jimmy's looking into different changes with teacher certification period, but what we really try to do is we see what they have requirements for prep, teacher prep, and they help us to align what their coursework is and what they deem as what their certification, and then we try to make sure that course is matching. Is it still matching? And so Crystal Hort, who does a lot of their work right now, is trying to keep, trying to stay on top of it, because it's massive changes, as you can probably imagine. But I know Jimmy's really talking about flexibility with some of that, which would really be helpful. And I know Stephen's a big proponent of that too, to make it a little more flexible, especially with areas that can be taught. with expectation, of course. But yes, that's been discussed, especially when you have dual credit classes, you have CTE courses that are very content specific. I mean, there's some real opportunities out there. And so we feel good about them, which is why we had EPSB on board from the very beginning, because you really have to. It can't be an afterthought. It needs to be right working in tandem. So, yeah.
I'm very glad I just had, as we talk about aligning career pathways and alignment between K-12 and post-secondary, are they involved in part of this discussion? Okay.
Oh, yeah. CTE has been with us hand in hand. Kylie Whitaker's on every single call. And so we learned a lot from CTE because they have very clear pathways, whereas we have different requirements. And so we've tried to be really intentional, even deprecating codes that are repetitive, that would be confusing on, is that a pathway course or not? And so it's been really rich discussion. So it's,
even with post-secondary?
yes.
Okay.
So we've had it all laid out, which CTE is really well vetted in that too, and what counts, what doesn't, and how things are outlined. So that's exactly who we're working with, and it's really a project, I guess. And we really do a lot where we meet weekly. So it's been a lot of work. Yeah, it's worthy, like I said.
Okay. Any other discussion on this item? If not, we'll have a second reading on this in December.
Yes,
right?
sir. That's right.
And now we have a report on implementation of the preschool partnership grants.
Yes, and I will tell you, I'm going to go through this, and I know it, but I will tell you, Bill Buchanan, who is here.
He's here.
Oh,
I'm here.
look at you! Well, come on up here, Bill. I thought he had to go pick up his daughter.
I do have to pick up my daughter.
I know you do. So I'm going to let you. But Bill is our legislative, I guess, or policy analyst for preschool. But he's really amazing with what he does. So I'm going to let him give you all the update on the preschool partnership grants that were placed in the budget the last biennium. So.
Right. So, as you may know, the preschool partnership grants represent a promising opportunity for school districts and child care providers to build capacity to provide full-day, high-quality services to eligible children. And so, we just wanted to share a little bit of an update about this program with you. Just as a reminder, the purpose again is to promote strong partnerships across school districts and child care providers for full-day, high-quality services. Full-day means at least 6 hours of program services, 4 or 5 days a week. High quality means at least 3 stars in the new Kentucky All-Stars system, promoting quality. It's a quality rating improvement system in Kentucky. CCAP refers to Child Care Assistance Program. This is a program through the Cabinet for Health and Family Services, providing subsidies to parents who work or attend education and training programs. Yeah, move forward. So that's, again, a little bit about the purpose. I want to say a little bit about the shareholders who were involved in developing the grant application, or at least the framework for the grant requirements. In the summer of 2016, we brought together multiple shareholders to discuss ideas and to develop a framework for their grant requirements. It included superintendents, so school districts were represented, child care directors, preschool coordinators, the Cabinet for Health and Family Services, as well as the department. We also work with the Pritchard Committee, and we work with School Readiness Consulting. This is a group in North Carolina to develop the grant requirements as well as professional learning opportunities for the partnerships. It's important to know that we, for organizational purposes, have divided the grant opportunity into 3 categories. The first category is Tier 1. It's for planning grants. The planning grants, examples of this would include establishing new relationships with childcare or between districts and childcare providers, finding kids that are not being served. I heard a little bit of some of the discussion earlier about what needs to be done to reach more at-risk children. So again, this is an opportunity for doing so. Developing shared expertise through training and professional learning. Tier 2, these are the implementation grants. They're really designed to help establish partnerships with elevating the quality of services. Examples of this include providing full-day schedules, offering summer learning and enrichment activities, and sharing access to professional development, professional learning opportunities. And finally, Tier 3, these are continuation grants. They were designed to support last year's, or 16-17's, Tier 2 grantees with sustaining services. That is to build local capacity to sustain those services in the long term. This next slide shows the awards for 16-17. So as you see, Tier 1, we awarded 23 grants for about $500,000. Tier 2, we awarded 46 grants for about $6 million. This next slide points out some successes, but we really need to say that we haven't collected enough data yet to evaluate the success of the partnership program. And we can say that the partnerships have reported opening additional full-day sites and improving quality in early care and education settings. Also, we know about 900 child care, Head Start, and preschool staff have received training, professional learning supports through this grant.
How is quality measured?
Quality is measured by participation in All Stars.
Okay.
And that is a comprehensive framework. We can talk more about that. And it's now a unified system that includes Head Start, preschool, and child care. Previously it was a voluntary system for child care. Now preschool and Head Start are mandated to be in it at the entry level. For preschool, that's at level 3. Through this grant, that's a starting place. We really want to see partnerships move to levels 4 and 5. This points out, well, just very quickly, just to say, go back one slide, this is just current funding for 17-18 for tiers 2, 1, 2, and 3. In terms of the amounts, you don't see the awarded amounts, you see the number of grantees there. For tier 1, it's around 113,000. We had 5 grantees. Again, minimum award would be about $25,000. For Tier 2, it's about $3.8 million for 27 grantees, and roughly the same amount, $3.8 million, 52 grantees at Tier 3. At Tier 2, the maximum award is $150,000. At Tier 3, the maximum award is $75,000. The idea is that with this legislation, the intent is to incentivize. So the thought is we want to get partnerships up off the ground and moving forward, and by the time they reach Tier 3, they should be self-sustaining, or at least on their way, on the path to become self-sustaining partnerships. Okay, we're going to show a couple of maps. This is for 16-17. And gold, you see in gold, those are the Tier 1 partnerships. In green are the Tier 2 partnerships. Right, and just as a reminder, again, in partnership with the Pritchard Committee and with Strong Start, we provide professional learning supports to the grantees. We invited Nebraska's Sixpence Initiative. Nebraska is already doing public-private partnerships between school districts and child care providers. We asked if they could provide our providers with a question and answer session. And it was a good exchange of ideas around how to build and sustain partnerships. We also held a similar session with a superintendent in St. Johnsbury School District in Vermont. A similar question and answer response session about increasing access and building strong partnerships. And here we see a map of 17-18. And again, gold is Tier 1, green is Tier 2, blue is Tier 3. What you may have noticed if you were to compare the two maps is we see some gaps in the map, especially in eastern Kentucky. And what we know is most school districts in the Big Sandy and Kentucky River area development districts, there are 18 school districts in those two ads. 3 of those school districts in those 2 ads actually did receive grants. However, we did a bit more digging. We explored and we found that 11 of the districts in those 2 areas already provide full or partially blended services through Head Start. So there's existing quality there. 14 of them provide full-day services to at-risk preschool students already. There are still issues and there are still opportunities, we think, in eastern Kentucky, but in many cases school districts are already providing full-day services. They're partnered with Head Start to provide high-quality environments for at-risk kids. So that's what we've learned to this point. The final slide involves next steps, and we just want to say that we will be providing leadership, service, and support to these partnerships moving forward. We will also be working to identify and profile successful partnerships across Kentucky. The Preacher Committee has released a special report highlighting 3 partnerships in Kentucky. They released this report in June, and they highlighted 3 districts. They highlighted Warren County and the Foundry Christian Community Center are focused on increasing access to high-quality preschool services in the West End and Bowling Green, and showing lots of promise and progress with doing that. Newport Independent in Northern Kentucky and Children's Inc. have partnered, and they're focused on improving quality and access, but the focus there is mostly on professional learning and supports for teachers in childcare and in preschool through mentoring and coaching. Monroe County is focused on increasing quality and access with a focus on kindergarten readiness and family engagement. So, be glad to answer any questions that you may have about the partnership grants to this point.
So tell me a little bit about the, on slide 2, the partnerships are designed to help develop full-day, high-quality early child programs for CCAP eligible. Can you say a bit more about what CCAP is and what that means?
Yes, CCAP is a program administered through the Cabinet for Health and Family Services. CCAP refers to Child Care Assistance Program, and it is a subsidy for families who are working or who are participating in training and education programs. So they have a similar eligibility criteria in terms of income. They have additional criteria than we do for preschool, but income, it's set at 160% of federal poverty level. So it looks like a great opportunity for partnership.
And so it actually subsidizes the preschool expenses for the family if they're eligible.
If they're up to 160%, they're working or in an education program, it subsidizes those parents' child care.
So some of these initiatives are designed to expand participation or increase the subsidy. I mean, would it be both? Would it primarily be about increasing participation?
I think that the intent is to improve quality and ensure that we have more full-day services.
Right.
It's increasing quality. We want to see increased participation too and access. That's really what this is about. We want at-risk kids having more opportunities, but what opportunities are we wanting them to have?
Sure, right.
It should be in a high-quality setting for full-day. Research suggests that kids are going to be more likely for future academic success when they participate in a full-day program.
Right. So it is a blend then of resources, training and supports, and programming costs for those child care centers, but in some cases it's also meant to support the actual preschool costs for eligible families.
Now, the grant, the money doesn't go towards kids, but it goes towards opening up more spots and the training and increasing the quality and the opportunity to have full day. So the CCAP funding goes, and it will go to the daycare centers with the schools on behalf of a child.
Right.
And what had happened too, Gary, a couple years ago, don't hold me exactly when, that funding went down and the eligibility changed, and so there wasn't enough participation. It dropped significantly.
Right.
So they really wanted to increase that opportunity, that resource for families who were working ultimately to get children into high quality wraparound services. So they didn't have a half day, because some families go, no thank you. You know, what am I supposed to do with my child for a half day? So it really was to help jumpstart partnerships to say, well, you can provide a half day preschool setting for us, you know, with a quality teacher, with a certified teacher, and we can provide the space for the child care centers. And so ultimately that partnership, which is what we're anxious to get the feedback on, and after a little while, we felt like after 1 year it's not validated yet, you know, 1 year, but to really have those partnerships to increase the children who really qualify for CCAP to have a true wraparound program, and they won't, you know, with high quality, with expectations. And the STARS rating is pretty rigorous, you know, to have that expectation of what's offered to those children.
Right.
So that's what was, you know, that was actually the language in the bill, or in the budget, and so that's how we were charged to fulfill that. And so that's how we ask the districts.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
sure.
I'd really like us to see, because I know we're going to get questions, right, from in legislative session in terms of whether or not this is something that should continue. Right? And folks are divided. So school districts want the dollars to remain with schools. And a lot of folks in child care want the dollars to continue to be in partnership grants. So I think what would be really helpful in the conversation is if we could talk about, even though short-term, what some short-term outcomes have been. Right? Clearly, we don't have enough time to be able to talk about long-term successes, but there are some short-term outcomes we can talk about. We can talk about whether there have been increases in rate of participation. We can talk about what these partnerships have actually done with the grant dollars. How many that got Tier 1 grant dollars continued it? If you got a Tier 2 grant, have you continued that? And then how many additional kids are you serving? I think that kind of stuff would be really helpful to inform us.
And how many have moved from 3 stars to 4 stars?
Right.
So that we wouldn't be able to speak to in that year 1, because this is the first year that we've used that rating system.
But if there's something we could do there to say quality is evident in this, they're doing whatever in 3-star, and it's obvious they're moving to 4-star in these areas, it would really be worthwhile to do that.
Sure.
I may have shared that we do know in 17-18 we had 16 additional districts to participate and partnerships. Right? There were 9 districts that did not choose to reapply, but we fully expended all the funds. In fact, we had to supplement with other funding just to ensure that all high-quality proposals were funded in 17-18.
Do we know what percent of Tier 1 grant funded ones actually moved on?
We can get that.
Yeah,
we can get that.
We have all that data. We can
and
share
then with
that.
the Tier 2 as well,
Who went with their Tier 3?
Yeah, what are they still intact, or
Right.
did they take the money and run?
Right. Yeah.
Why didn't they move to Tier 2?
Roughly how many students or kids are we serving through this? Do you know?
Through the partnership? Not for sure the partnership.
Yeah, we can get that too, and that's going to be more challenging to identify. We'll do our best because of the nature of the potential for double counting, and as well as attributing an enrollment to these dollars. So
We can get numbers though, just so you have an idea
Yeah.
of how
It's
many
kinda
kids could be impacted.
How many, kids, let's say 16, 17, were preschool age
Sure.
statewide, and then how many were participants? What percentage of those kids were, participants into this program? I'm just curious, are we talking 2 or 3%? Are we talking about 60%? I don't have a clue, and I just wondered, how many kids are we really impacting?
Sure.
How many more do we need to impact?
I like that, and I think we can find that in terms of impact. Enrollment may be more challenging. A potential confounding factor for the upcoming school year is the fact that the age change for kindergarten, the cutoff change. So districts are already seeing on the preschool side an increase in enrollment, certainly an interest in preschool enrollment. So I won't be surprised if we see a bump in enrollment this year that may or may not be attributed to some of the strategies that we have in place.
But we can definitely provide possible contributing factors, just so you're aware of other things that may not be what we would contribute to one thing, but it could be some things, just so you have an idea, context of what's out there. And maybe it might be helpful, maybe if we kind of did that by the grants, and then you could see by region. It may be very different. So yeah, we can do that.
Just anecdotally, I'm a little bit familiar with some of these initiatives in the Warren County area, and I'm hearing really positive things about this. And there's a real challenge in building those relationships. A big piece of this is just building relationships, because a lot of private preschool providers, they look at the state as sort of an inspectorate, and so what we're trying to do here is invite them into a real partnership to actually improve their programs in a way that isn't about judging whether they're doing a good job or not, but to help them build on what's already going on there.
That's exactly
and
right.
so those initial results anyway seem to be really positive.
Absolutely. And when we first started and had that group together, the advisory group, one of our dynamic superintendents said, we have a great preschool, but I don't have any daycares. And daycare was here, and they said, the director, and she said, oh, you do, you have 3 daycares in your community. And she said, who are they? She didn't even know. And then the lady pulled up the list and said, here's your list. And she said, oh my gosh, I didn't even know they existed. So that awareness, I think, is a little more prevalent this year than it even was last year, because a lot of them were going, we don't have anybody to partner with. And then once people started to reach out, and childcare was very hesitant, you know, when they're like, wait a minute, that's our business. You know, so it's the adult partnership and the business agreements, you know, and the true collaboration is probably the largest challenge. But yeah, I think that's...
And the vast majority of those kids are going to wind up in the public school district in the end. So making that investment early on, it makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
One of the problems that I heard about was that private preschools really didn't measure up, so that public didn't want to work with them. Is that perception changing now?
Jill, have you heard anything?
Anecdotally, we're hearing that it's changing, but yeah, there's a long, we have more work to do. We just do, right? To address what are true issues with quality, and 2, to address what are just issues with perception of quality. And if you're not having those conversations with child care partners and learning what they actually do, the fact that they're NACE certified, that they are in stars, that they might have 4 or 5 stars, rather than just based on anecdote, then yeah, those myths and perceptions will persist. But that's not to say there aren't issues with quality. There really are, and the partnerships represent an opportunity for addressing those issues.
No, with funding for professional learning, everybody wins with this.
That's right.
My cousin is a preschool director in North Carolina, and she says that their numbers went down this year because of the Hispanic population, that they were so frightened of ICE that they were pulling their children or not putting them in to begin with, depending on the year. Have you seen that at all here?
Yes, in Jefferson County.
In Jefferson County.
That is really an issue for those children.
Any other discussion on the preschool partnerships? Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Amanda.
Thank
Thanks
you.
to all the staff for sticking around late tonight. We appreciate it. I'll need a motion and second to adjourn the committee meeting. Motion from Elisa. Nawana with a second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you all.
Thanks.